So the 1950s and cinema, it's an incredible era in global cinema, but I think it's really an era that people in America really, really think of as one of the great eras of American movies. Rear Window is,
in my opinion, is the greatest.
in your opinion, is the greatest. Excellent.
Not everybody shares that, but I feel so.
Okay.
That's why I wrote this book.
That's amazing. So why is it the greatest era of American movies?
It was an era where the studios had to be inventive to bring people back from the ultimate body snatcher, television. Television was taking people away from the theaters.
Interesting.
So Hollywood, in many ways, had to reinvent itself by putting on films, the kinds of films you couldn't see at home on your new TV sets. 3D, color, spectacles, epics, musicals, CinemaScope, Cinerama, VistaVision, which our film tonight is in.
Amazing. It's interesting. It seems almost like we're back to that a little bit, where people are trying to figure out how to bring people back into the movie theaters. One of the things that I thought was so interesting last year was one of the top movies of the year, The Brutalist, was shot in VistaVision. That was the first time a movie had been shot in VistaVision in some time. Can you tell us a little bit about that format?
Well, the VistaVision, the main widescreen process of the 50s was CinemaScope. Do you remember that? CinemaScope, those of you who are old enough to know. We now call it Panavision. It's a widescreen process.
Mm-hmm.
VistaVision was widescreen, but not as wide as CinemaScope. But what VistaVision had was great depth and clarity in the image. It was sharper than almost any other kind of image. And you had more detail. You saw more. And you'll see that at work in the film today.
That's amazing. One of the things that I love most about this movie is Grace Kelly. And I know you wrote a little bit about her in your book and discussing about it. Tell us a little bit about Grace Kelly in Rear Window and what our audience should be looking for in her performance this evening.
Grace Kelly was a one-of-a-kind Hollywood star. She had a very short career. 51, by 56 she was leaving, becoming princess in Monaco. And in 1954 she made about 5 films and won the Academy Award. What you're about to see is, in my opinion, her greatest performance. Such charm, such effortlessness, such a natural, such beauty, and such an image of what it meant to be feminine or a woman. You can't even say those words anymore. It was a very different image, the 50s image of the feminine. Look at movies today, you don't find it.
What I think is so interesting about that is that she's really the action star of the film in a lot of ways. I think if you haven't seen it, Grace Kelly really takes a lot of action here this evening.
Absolutely, because her boyfriend is incapacitated. His leg is in a cast, and you can read all kinds of sexual imagery into that. And I think Hitchcock wanted you to do that. But also, she's the one who becomes active. She does things that her fiance can't do. They are a mismatch. Very strange couple. Are they going to be successful together? I'm not sure the film answers that question. It leaves it up to us.
Interesting. We live in an era of social media, a lot of people recording things all the time, looking at each other. Voyeurism has become, almost sort of a daily part of life. What do you think Rear Window has to say about that sort of aspect of things, and photography in particular, but just voyeurism in general?
How many of you have seen it, by the way? And
I saw it in your class at Brooklyn College.
You did? You took my class at Brooklyn College?
I sure did.
Okay.
That's great.
And how many of you are seeing it for the first time tonight? Okay, most people have seen it, but it's a film about looking. It's a film about watching. It's a film about James Stewart is a photojournalist. He's incapacitated, leg in a cast. He's bored. It's summer. To pass the time, he turns his camera onto his neighbors, and he looks at what's going on in all the rear windows of his courtyard. And he thinks he discovers a plot. And we're there right along with him. It's a universal thing. We're to say voyeurs. I guess we're all voyeurs. Right?
Yeah.
We're all interested in looking. All of you are here tonight because you want to see something on the screen. You're curious to look. We're all looking all the time. But here, looking is foregrounded. It becomes very prominent. And what he's doing in the film is what we're going to be doing tonight. When we put ourselves in front of that movie screen, we become willing voyeurs. We're almost complicit in the stories that are being told. We all like to look at each other all the time, and it's a universal human characteristic. So he's watching through his camera. The camera gets bigger when he gets frustrated and thinks he can't get enough detail. He wants to find out what's going on in all of those windows. And what's interesting is that what's happening in each of the windows has some reflection on him and on his evolving relationship with his, I would say, mismated fiancée. They're crazy about each other, but there's a mismatch. In all the rooms that we look at across the courtyard, there's something wrong in each of them, and that something wrong is always a reflection of what's wrong in our main character's house and in his psychology. The camera virtually never leaves his studio apartment. You think, oh my goodness, it's going to be a film of great confinement and entrapment. Not at all.
Yeah.
You feel very open and liberated watching the film, and you want more and more detail. You wish you could leap across the courtyard and go into those other apartments and see the stories up close, but you can't.
I think one of the genius parts of the film is the set design, and I think that really contributes to that. Can you talk a little bit about how Hitchcock constructed this courtyard?
It is all constructed. It's one huge set at Paramount, and brilliantly in deep focus, and that's the deep focus of VistaVision, you see a sliver of a Manhattan street in the village and pedestrians walking by. I live in the village, and my courtyard, my back courtyard, is not totally different from the courtyard in this film. So I'm living rear window all the time, and all of my neighbors are living rear window all the time.
That's amazing.
And he constructed it so that you had all these windows that were in sight of our protagonist's window, and he had access to all those screens. But he can't enter the screens. He can only see them from a distance. And he wants to see more and more when he thinks he discovers a murder. And we want him to discover a murder, because if there isn't a murder, it isn't as interesting as if there is. Hitchcock involves us. We're complicit in a scenario of, I would to say sadistic, but we want to be thrilled. If there's no murder, we feel let down. It's just
So we started the conversation talking about 1950s cinema and how it drew people back in. You know, they were looking to draw people back into it. I want to leave a little bit of time so that we can do a Q&A, so I'll wrap this up. But I did want to ask a little bit about the short that we're going to show before the movie, which is the Warner Brothers What's Opera doc. And I just wanted to get not necessarily specifics about that, but why they would show these cartoons and what they meant to audiences seeing cinema in the 1950s.
When we went to movies in the 50s, and I was old enough to do that, that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to relive my early cinema experiences. We had a cartoon, we had the main feature, we often had a newsreel, preview coming attractions. That's all you get today is a half hour of previews. We had one or two previews of what's next week, and there was often the double feature. The double feature went the way of all flesh in the 60s, but in the 50s, it was, except for first runs, you had the double feature. But we're a first run here, so we don't have a double feature.
That's right.
We have a cartoon.
We do have a cartoon. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We are so excited to have our first inaugural programming. We're going to show the 1950s Warner Brothers cartoon, What's Opera Doc, which is Kill the Rabbit. I mean, it's the best ever. And then, of course, Alfred Hitchcock's 1956 classic, I think it's 1956 classic, Rear Window.
1954.
1954. There you go. He's the expert. 1954. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Foster Hirsch.